Hey guys, thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you joining me today for this webinar. And we're gonna wait for a couple more minutes. But before we start, I would actually like to share with you the book that I've been recently reading. It's called Viral Loops. So this book has been written, I believe, in 2008 and 2009, and it provides some of the good examples about how the first viral products have been built on the internet. So it talks about the stories from Hotmail and from Mosaic browser that was created by Mark Anderson, who right now is Anderson Horowitz. VC, running Anderson Horowitz VC. So this is an interesting book. I don't think it's has any prescriptions in terms of how to actually build viral products. I think it's very difficult to do, but at the same time, it provides a lot of great examples, even from examples from Tupperware from 50s and 40s, how the housewives have been creating those house parties and selling some Tupperware, which is interesting to look back and see how the viral products were actually created. So we're going to wait for another minute and then we're going to start. My goal for this webinar is to help you guys understand ideal customer profile and how to create ideal customer profile. And we're going to dig into some of the areas that I found helpful while creating ideal customer profile for many of the companies that I work with, as well for my own personal project that I've been researching. All right, so let's get started. So how to create ideal customer profile. My goal here is to explain how to create ideal customer profile to you, and as well as explain you why it is important, and explain how to use that information, in creating effective marketing playbook and creating effective go-to-market strategy. So very quickly, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Myk Pono, and I have over 10 years of experience in doing B2B enterprise and SaaS marketing. For the last 5 years, I've been consulting multiple SaaS companies, and while creating marketing strategies, I realized that one of the most important things for actual marketing strategy is to understand ideal customer profile as who you want to target. And we're going to talk about this on this webinar, but I also co-authored the book with co-founders of Uptrinsic, Mastering Product Experiences SaaS, where we talked very deeply into how to create personalized product and customer experiences using product-led go-to-market strategy, meaning that how do you personalize your product by understanding how your customers use your product and who your customers are. Also, I write on marketing strategy and product growth on Medium, and so far my articles have been read by over 350,000 people. And for those who, most of you have been familiar with my articles, but I would, for those who haven't, you can look into and follow me on Medium for that. Yes, we're going to, I had a question. Yes, we're going to record this and I will share with you this webinar after we're done. So yes. So, all right, so agenda for today, why you should care about ideal customer profile. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but I want to set the stage. Then in part 2, we're going to discuss key elements of ICP. And here I'm going to dive into 9 different steps that are critical to creating ideal customer profile. And in part 3, we're going to summarize of how do you take that information that you find by talking to your customers, and how do you integrate that with your marketing playbook or with your go-to-market strategy. Like, how do you actually use that information that you find from your customers? So let's get started. So why should you care about ideal customer profile? And let me start this with this quote from Peter Drucker, who was a great management consultant in 20th century, who said that because the purpose of business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. And I think the key word here is to create a customer. I think that's where I want to focus here. It doesn't say identify customer, it doesn't say to find customer. It actually has to create customer. What that means is that you want to understand what your customers' needs are, and we want to understand their pains. You want to understand the context into which they make a decision, and then you want to use that information to build the future of the customer, sort of a promised land, or where you want to take them with your product. Where is your solution going to take your customers, and how your customers going to be changed through your product and your solution. So that's an important thing that I would like you to take out from this webinar. So a couple of principles. First, I know it's a very basic principle. We're going to just fly through it. You know, you can't please everyone. You can't build product that everybody uses. And even if you look at the product that are very popular, like Salesforce, for example, you'll see that even Salesforce qualifies their customers, and it doesn't sell to everyone, because in order to afford Salesforce, you have to be a certain size of the company. So you can't please everyone. You have to be focusing on segments of the customers that are actually more profitable for you and for those who actually experience pain the most. So principles number two is that companies that are closest to the customers will win. There is multiple examples that you can give here, but I would like to share this example that probably all of you know about, Toys R Us. So this is a toy retailer that went out of business and filed for bankruptcy in 2017. And in 2018, they closed all their stores. And one of the key decisions that Toys R Us have made in 2000, they signed the agreement with Amazon to actually outsource all the fulfillment to Amazon. So they actually put Amazon in between them and their customers, because they didn't realize that buying online would become a preference for the customers. So where they were not being able to actually understand how the preference of the customers change, and what the inventory works and doesn't. So that's a very great example that actually caused Toys R Us to go out of business almost 18 years later, because they tried to put somebody else in the middle between them and their customers. So customers is as everything. Your customers are at the center of everything you do as an organization, and you want to start with them when you start with your sales and marketing strategy, because understanding your customers will be key to actually creating your brand story. And the brand story is like this whole big story about how you're going to change the customer's life and what kind of pain that you solve for your customers. It's also impact your strategic messaging, which is a more strategic in terms of talking about your values and the pains that you solve for your customers. And that, again, understanding your customers is key, because you're going to use those messages, you're going to use this understanding that contents into creating those messages in your email, in your website, in your marketing copy, and so forth. So understanding your customers is also key for content strategy, because as you understand the context in which customers make the decisions, as you understand their pains, as you understand what they have to deal on a daily basis, you can create content that tailors to that, to your customers, and that's will make your content more effective and efficient. So the other piece that the customer is understanding your customer is very key to is actually understanding how your customers buy, because as you understand how your customers buy, you can tell your sales process to fit your customers process, meaning that who's involved in your in the customer buying decision. Do they use free trial or freemium process? Do they actually how do they actually do onboarding and nurturing? So all that, what we call a customer acquisition and sales process. And of course, it will impact pricing as well. But a lot of times when I work with companies, I go in and I ask, hey, do you know who your customers are? And they typically say that, yeah, we know, and they have outlined the pains. And I would like to tell you this very quick story of actually buying a couch. I know that's a little bit outside of SaaS, and little bit outside of software, but I think that illustrates an important point about context. So if you walk into the store and you want to buy a couch, and you walk around, a salesperson comes to you and she asks you a couple of questions about what type of, how much money do you want to spend, what's your preference, what kind of color of the couch do you want to buy? And this has actually happened to me a year ago when I was buying a couch. And the salesperson would ask all of those questions, then she would walk around and present me with a couple of options. And as she presents those options, I can see that those options do not apply to me. I see that those options are not very good. And it took me a while to realize that for me, it was easy to realize that this couch in particular is not a good fit for me because it doesn't fit my furniture. It doesn't fit the size of my room, or it doesn't fit the way that lighting actually goes into my room. And that's an important point where we as organization, when we try to sell our products and our solution, we need to understand the context in which customer makes a decision. And for me, and that process of buying a couch, I had the gap between understanding what the actual context of my decision, but salesperson has not asked any type of questions about my room, about what kind of furniture I have. So it wasn't easy for me to recognize, oh, you know what? This is why I don't like this couch, because I can actually close my eyes and picture the room, and I know that's not going to work. For the salesperson, she never seen my room. She never seen my living room. She doesn't know how that couch would actually fit. So, and this is an important point that I would like to make, that you have to understand your context of your customer. And there are 4 levels of customer analysis. And I'm not saying that you should like break your customers into your target audience or potential customer, ideal customers profile. But what I'm trying to understand is that first, as you start creating your ideal customer profile, you want to talk to everybody in your target audience, everybody who has a potential pain. So for example, if you sell a content publishing platform for marketers, you want to talk to VPs of marketing in every different organization, because this will allow you to test and see how those people are different in all the different segments. Then when you start just having those conversations, you will see that some experience more pain about this particular the pain that you're solving, and they are actually a good fit, meaning that they might be a VP of marketing from the company that has a certain amount of revenue, and they actually can afford your product. So ideal customer profile, that's important to understand, is that those people have a pain. It's like an extremely big pain for them. They're a good fit, meaning that they have an ability to buy your product, but also they're actively looking for a solution. So they actually understand the pain. They're aware that it's happening, and they're ready and willing and able to buy. And only then you can dig down and actually create persona. And persona is basically an ideal customer profile with psychographic information attached to that. That's maybe something to do about being an early adopter. Maybe it's something that about attitudes, values, and beliefs. And this is the way you want to approach your creating ideal customer profile. Because if you're going to jump into creating persona, for example, you can have 2 VPs of marketing, John and Mary, and they both have the same psychographic psychographic characteristics, but if they're in a different organization, the level of the pain they experience that you're solving might be completely different. So if we go back to the example of content publishing platform, if you are John in an organization where you have just 20 people, that your needs are much different than if you're VP of marketing in an organization that has 500 needs. I know it sounds obvious, but that's important to think about. Don't just jump into creating persona and ideal customer profile. Try to talk to as many different representatives in your industries to understand what are those segments that might actually be profitable for you. And the other piece that I want to really mention here, that the ideal customer profile, if you find that who has a pain, who has a good fit, and who are actually looking for a solution, the goal here is that your customer acquisition cost will be much lower than your customer lifetime value, meaning that you're going to spend acquiring this customer much less than actually that customer is going to pay you over time. And that's important because, if that's an ideal customer for you, meaning you're not going to spend too much time actually selling to the customer. So I want to, before we move into step 2, I would like to ask you a quick question. Do you have an ideal customer profile outlined in your organization? So if you, I'm going to launch a poll here. I would like to then go out, after this webinar, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm going to just look how that works for you. So we know, does it mean... Dmitry, I will get back to your question at the end. So the part 2, the key elements of ICP, and there is 9 steps of creating ideal customer profile that I found very helpful. In this year alone, I have conducted over 80 customer discovery interviews where my goal was to create ideal customer profile, or what my goal was to research my customers for my clients or for the ideas that I'm working on. So I put those 9 steps that allow you to understand your customers from all different angles, and this process will allow you to understand your customer from 360 view. First, you want to understand target organization. You want to understand customer demographics. You want to learn about day in the life, how the day looks. You want to understand the environment, the market, and external forces that actually impact what your customers do. You want to understand their buying process. How do they purchase? Who's involved in the process? What's the typical implementation looks like? Step 6, you want to dig into the pains, problems, and values that you're solving for your customers. And in step 7, we're going to talk about empathy and what do they say, what do they think, and how you should change your questions and how you should actually ask questions when you're interviewing your customers. Step 8 is that you want to know what they read, what type of events they attend, and who do they follow, who are the industry thought leaders that they actually follow. And step 9, who do you want your customers to become? So that relates to actually creating your customers, like who is that, how are you going to change their life of your customers so that they become someone else from the standpoint of feeling, from standpoint of their responsibilities at work. So step number 1, very simple. I think everybody knows this at this point, but you have to understand your target organization. And when you go when you go and create the ideal customer profile, it's important to understand that if you are targeting VPs of marketing in a small company versus large companies, the prioritization and the pains will change. And when you create the ideal customer profile, you want to understand how, what organization they're coming from, what's the size of this organization, what is the revenue that they generate, what is the industry, and sometimes you could go into geography and location. So that's the step number 1. Outline the organization where your ideal customers come from. Step number 2, understand your customer profile, and that basically the person that's going to be your either economic buyer or your end user. And you want to understand the titles and the function, what type of responsibility they have in the organization, because sometimes the title is not exactly what type of function or what are the things that they actually do. I think the good example here that in these days VP of marketing is sometimes responsible for growth, and sometimes you hear head of growth, a person who actually responsible for marketing activities and sales. So it's also important to understand the title, also in function. How big is a team? That's what allows you to understand that if it's a VP of marketing, the size of the team will define, and your understanding of their team will define how they spread this information. How do they actually spread their goals through the team, and who's responsible for what? Role in the buying process. I think typically we divide the buying roles into 3 main categories. Economic buyers, those are the people who actually make decision, and this is typically people who experience the most pain. Influencers, those people who might not use the product directly, but will be impacted by it. Sometimes it's very often it's ITs who have to that have to approve this implementation or solution, or maybe some sort of security clearance. And the end user, ideally your end user and your economic buyer would be one person, but sometimes those in a large organization, those roles actually spread through a couple of people. And of course, the technical stack. And the tech stack is important because you want to know what type of products you use, because maybe you want to partner with them, maybe you want to integrate with them. And also it's important because you want to know how happy they are with the current solution. Like what is the solution right now that if you talk to them like, hey, I cannot leave, I cannot really be productive in my responsibility if I don't have these 3 products, because at the end of the day, your product will have to be or needs to be in very top of your customer priority, and that will allow you to see where the integration possibility happens from a technical side. So step number 3, as you understand the organization, as you understand the customer, now let's dig into their daily responsibilities. So this is where you want to understand what they do on a daily basis. So typically, when I talk to when I do customer interviews, I ask them, hey, tell me about your daily activities. What are you responsible for? Then I go in and dig into the goals. What are the goals that you're trying to achieve right now? I also like to ask questions about current goals and the long-term goals, like what is your quarterly goals and what's your goals today? Because sometimes your goal today is to get out some article if you're VP of marketing and get this research out or hire a writer, but your goal for a quarter may be driving leads, driving traffic, something like that. Current process to achieve these goals. This is where I actually ask them. So you have this goal of generating more leads. What is your current process to achieving the goals? And I actually would write down like step 1, step 2, step 3 to kind of understand how many steps. And then I ask them like, what are the big challenges about this process right now? What are the things in this process that you hate, you don't like, you don't think is effective? And I actually allow customers to kind of walk me through this process and with a sense of like, what are the challenges and pains that they experience. Then, not very often that people actually share the budgets, but I do ask sometimes, what is the budget you have? How much money you spent on content marketing, or how much money you spend on calculating your net promoter score, for example. Success metrics. Success metrics is something that they report on a regular basis. So typically in a well-run company, let's put it this way, there's some sort of metrics that everybody consistently reporting on and in their organization and that could be on the weekly basis, on the monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. So you want to know these metrics because the goal for you would be to tie your solution to some metrics that is important for your customers. Because if you drive this metric, you become indispensable for your target, for your ideal customers. And step 4, now let's talk about an environment. An environment is like, it's basically like a big wave, like some tectonic shifts. And I picked up this idea from this great book by Oren Klaff called Pitch Anything. And this book, it talks about how do you present your ideas, how you pitch your ideas, how do you pitch your company, your product, and so forth. And he talked about that, but framing your solution around big forces that happens regardless of whether your ideal customer actually knows about it or not. So some of those could be economic forces like recession, for example, 2008, that actually forced a lot of layoffs and the spikes and decrease in interest rates. So those economic forces you want to understand when you talk to your customers, and you want to understand what is that forces that change, that have to change how your customers operate. Basically, there's some of the technology forces, that could be the new technology that coming into the market, and now everybody in the marketplace, especially for your ideal customer profile, have to change. And the social forces, like there is certain expectations or certain things that changes maybe in your customers, and the customers of your customers, basically, that forces them to change how they do things. And I think that the great example here is going back to this of Toys R Us, where Toys R Us have not understood those economic, technology, and social forces, because first the new technology, online buying, came in and they were not aware about it, and then the as a result, the customer expectation has changed. So as you create your ideal customer profile, ask them questions. What do you think is happening in your industry? What do you think is changing in your industry? What do you think your industry is going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years? So ask those questions and understand, tune in into what are the things that might be changing for them. So step number 5, as you understand the organization, as you outline the demographics, the day in life, and the market forces, now let's look into your buying process. And here you want to learn how your customers buy. And typically what I do is that I ask them questions. So how do you typically buy products? So who, like the last time you bought, as you ask questions about like what is a tech stack, what is the product that you're using, ask them how the last time you bought those products, what happened, like who was responsible for this buying decision. And buying decision is a continuous process. You wanna basically look into the buying process before you actually purchase the product, because your goal here is basically convince customer to buy and show them that you can solve certain pain or provide certain value. And after you buy, you wanna actually make sure that your implementation of your product is very smooth. So something that they can quickly implement and onboarding is clear. So before you buy the product, you want to understand like who would be your potential product champion, and hopefully that's going to be your ideal customer, and who are going to be part of the buying process. You typically like, hey, if you would buy content publishing platform, that's the question I would ask. Who else that would need to be involved in this decision? You want to understand who is an economic buyer. You also want to know like what is the risk involved in implementing your product. So for example, if you're migrating from one CRM to another CRM, that's a huge risk because you have to integrate data might get lost, you might have some loss in productivity, and that's a difficult thing to kind of understand if you don't really ask them about potential risks. What are the alternatives? You want to, before actually, I'm going to talk about this more in pains, but before you actually, before your customers buy, you want to know what are the risks for them to do nothing or do it yourself, and what is the competition. The other thing you want to look into is the objections and questions that your customer might have, because as you're going to be selling to your customers, you want to understand those questions prior so you can address them directly. And after the purchase, you want to, and basically that's another point that I want to make here, that after the purchase things, those like implementation, onboarding, how you're going to deliver the first value, and how you're going to educate everybody on this, on your product, that's actually something that you should start talking when you're selling the product. Because as soon as your customer is going to be considering your product, you want to tell them, you want to make sure that, you know what, implementation, we've got it. This is our plan to implement the product. You don't have to worry about it. Like, this is our onboarding. This is how we're going to train your people in your organization to actually use this product. This is how we're gonna get you to the first value. This is a step that we're gonna take, and you want to have this to be part of your buying process before actually customers sign up. So very quickly, I outline a few questions that you want to ask yourself when you think about buying process. And again, idea here that you want to first understand how your customers buy, like what that process would be for you, and then you can take this information and actually design this process from your standpoint. So don't just go in and create your sales process. I mean, you can, many companies have do it, but you will be more effective to understand how your customers buy. That's why it's important to know who's your ideal customers are and who actually involved in buying decision, and how the implementation will happen, and then mirror that process in your organization with the processes that actually mirror how your customers buy. So this is a couple questions you want to ask. And again, I won't worry about like writing those down. I will share this with you after the call. And this again, as you're after the customers buy, you want to make sure that you understand how you want to migrate from one solution to another, or how you want to implement, or what other people in organization that might benefit by learning from your product. So that's another thing. As you just sold to your ideal customer profile, maybe it's your product champion, you also want to know who else on the team needs to be part of this process, because the better you get everybody on board who will get value from your product, the harder it will be to replace your product with something else, because you're going to penetrate into organization deep. And you do that with education of your product, you do that with proper onboarding. So now let's dig into this big topic of pain and problems. All we've done before is just understanding the context, understanding and getting information from your customers. And now we're going to dig deep into actually problems and pains. I would like to start with a couple of principles. And again, I'm sure that you guys heard that, but I'd like to reiterate, it's worth repeating that when you sell you want to sell the pain, not a solution. You want to sell the pain, not your product, meaning that you want to educate and you want to tell your customers how, why this pain is important, how this pain prevents them from achieving their goals, and only then talk about how your product and your solution actually solve this pain. So the principle number 4 is that the bigger the pain that you're solving for the customer, the easier it is to sell the solution. And I think it's also obvious, but if something that a few times I can give an example on my own where I've never ran events, marketing events, and last year I was running my first event for Uptrinsic, and there was enormous pain when you develop the event. Like, you have to worry about food, about speakers, about venue, all of those things, transportation, microphones, videos. So when I was in such pain, I basically called to people who actually that event organizing, and I begged them to help me. That's how painful this was. So the bigger the pain, the easier it is to sell the solution. So there are 4 different ways of actually analyze your pain. And this is something I would like to suggest to you when you do your research, when you talk to your customers internally, or you go out, speak to your potential customers, and you create a ideal customer profile, gather all different pains that they have, not just the pains that your company solves, but every single pain, because you want to put the pain that you solve with your solution with other pains. And you want to know where that fits on your priority, on the priority list of your customers. So first of all, understand the awareness, understand the urgency. So awareness is something that actually, does the customer aware that they have a pain? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Ideally, you'll have a customer that are highly aware of the problem you're trying to solve, because then you'll have a shorter sales cycles and you're not going to spend a lot of time actually convincing them that this is a problem. So the second way to categorize or analyze the pains you get and the problems you hear from your customers, that how urgent is this problem? So is a customer taking any step to actually solve this problem, and where does it fit on a priority list? And then you want to understand the frequency of this pain occurs. So for example, like if CRM is again a great example, like the pain of actually managing your customers, it happens every day. So that's a very frequent problem. But for example, if your product prevents data breach, that's something that happens maybe once in a year. But nonetheless, that pain is very severe, which leads us to force a way to analyze the pain from a customer. How severe this pain is, like how big is this pain? Is this okay? Like pain okay? One of the interesting things is that I typically ask customer, like, how severe is this pain for you on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 to be extremely severe. And this is something that sometimes you see in a doctor's office where they have the scale rating of the pain. It's kind of like, hey, I'm painful, but we're on a scale of 1 to 10, where that pain fits. So I use this visual presentation that allows you to understand like awareness, like does the customer aware, or how that actually problem is urgent for your customers. And again, it's 2 by 4, and you have awareness from low to high, and you have urgency from low to high, and you wanna see where the pain that you gather from your customers actually fits here. And I actually plugged in these different types of problems that were outlined by Steve Blank in his book Startup startup owner's manual, which I think is very helpful. And if you look at the latent problems, this is basically the problem that the customers don't know that they have yet. So they're not aware. So that's why it has a low awareness and a low urgency, because you can't really be urgent about the problem that you're not aware of. So that means that if you have a latent problem, you solve a latent problem, you have to focus on education. You need to move that problem into awareness stage. You want to make sure that more and more people in your market actually understand this problem and understand why it is a big problem for them. Then passive problem. Passive problem are those problems that they know that it exists, so they're aware of the problem, but they're not done anything to solve it. So there's multiple reasons why the passive problems could happen. Maybe it's a very low on the priority list. Maybe pain is not big enough, but you want to. That's a good way to categorize the problem that have a low urgency but high awareness. And then the ideal situation is that where you have the high urgency and high awareness problem. And Steve Blank differentiated this to two categories. Number one is the vision problem. That's something that customer aware of the problem and actually took steps to build the solution internally, meaning that they might have some sort of dedicated team to try to solve this problem, but they also open to buy the outside solution if it's a better fit, or it solves the problem better, or maybe it actually reduces the cost. And the ideal situation for you is when you have an active problem that customers recognize, oh my God, this is a pain for me. I really need to solve this problem. And they actually actively looking for solutions. So they're in the buying stage, they're into evaluating stage. So you wanna, your ideal customer profile should be somewhere around high awareness and high urgency, because that means they're aware the problem exists and they actually willing to take steps to solve this problem. So another way, so we talked about, first of all, let me give you this first tip. Don't just ask your customers how urgent this problem is. And it's never seems to work well for me, because like it's difficult to know how, and actually it's difficult for customer to actually tell you how urgent it is. Well, urgency is better to be analyzed when it's compared, right? So the way I actually use when I talk to the customers, like first I collect, as I told you, I collect all different pains that the customers have. Like for example, as I was doing research on a content publishing platform, I figure out, creating, figure out the pain, figure out the topics to write was a pain, generating leads from content was pain, formatting content for publishing was pain, and all those pains that I've heard. But then I would ask customers, so you told me about those 5 pains. If you have to rank them in a matter of importance, and let them prioritize. And as they prioritize those pains, you will figure out how urgent the pain that you actually solve fits with everything else they have to deal with. And that's an important thing to know. So very quickly, so we talked about frequency and severity. Again, I use this visual presentation that allows you to kind of see how that fits between how the pain fits, the pain that you solve for your customers fits with all other pains. If you look, ideal situation is when you have a high frequency pain and it's a very severe pain. So we talked about CRM, managing sales process and managing customer relationship is very difficult. So that's where you do that on a daily basis. It's a very important pain, and that's ideal situation to be in. But sometimes you have problems that are frequent but not severe. For example, like working into the document, you might not see that it's a severe pain, or keep track of what documents you send to home and who has access, or maybe or maybe before Slack, I don't think you ever realized that there was a severe problem in team communication. I don't think everybody was sitting in the room like, I bet we have a better team communication. Let me search some for a solution for that. So, but at the same time, you can build the big companies as long as this pain, if pain is not severe, you want to at least that to be very, very frequent, something that happens on a daily basis, and it's basically like irritating problems that are small, but they just annoy people quite a bit. And on the other side, you want There are some pains that are severe but not frequent. I mean, I can give you a few examples. I've talked to you about event organizing. So you might not do a lot of events, but when you organize an event, it's a lot of things to deal with. It's a big pain, and it's still, you can be very successful providing solution for that pain. The great example that I like to use also is a data breach. It's a very severe problem. Like you hope that you never gonna experience it, but it's extremely severe consequences if your data was breached or somebody stole personal data of your customers. That's an extremely difficult thing to overcome. And before we go in, the SaaS purchasing and SaaS business is very difficult, because from one side, you need to satisfy business values, right? You need to satisfy business pains. But from the other side, you're still selling to people, and those people have their own values. They have their own personal needs. And there's a great article that I come across a couple of years ago from Harvard Business Review. And again, I'll send it to you. I highly, highly recommend reading it. And it talks about how to basically understand business and personal values. So they've done analysis, and they basically figure out that there are certain table stakes that you have to have. This is a must-have for you to kind of be in B2B sales. You have to satisfy those to sell to your customers. Then you have functional values like, hey, performance improvements or economic benefits to use your product. And then on another stage that you have easy of doing business. So it's like, improving productivity, access, or some sort of a strategic values that you provide from business side. And from a personal side, you have things like, you want to reduce anxiety. You want to make people that you sell to feel a certain way, that they're innovative, for example, or maybe your product can provide a little bit of more fun. And on the top of that value, they sort of the level of personal value is inspirational, right? Things that maybe they actually buy into your vision. So when you create your ideal customer profile, when you talk to your customers, be tuned into what they say. Be tuned that you can go in and say, okay, so they're very tuned into risk reduction, and you just put a check mark. And you more and more you talk to the customers, you realize that risk reduction is an extremely big value. So you might want to center your sales process, and maybe you want to even create content about how your solution provides a better risk reduction in the organization. But at the same time, don't forget that it is still a business, even though it's a business-to-business sales, it's still a person-to-person sales. So make sure you understand what the individual that actually buying that product needs. How do you want to make them? Do you want them to make them sort of like a product champion that everybody says, oh my God, if you're using this content publishing platform, we generate more leads, and everybody sees that person as a hero in their organization. So again, I highly recommend you to keep that perspective when you talk to and when you create ideal customer, and pick one or two or three from business values that you actually provide for customers, and one or two from a personal values. So also, as you understand this, understand customer pains, also understand what prevents them from actually reaching those pains. And this information can be then used in creating a brand story, into creating your messages. But you want to understand the villain and the enemy, who's preventing, like what do they hate about the company. And there's a couple great examples. I know it's been overused. Salesforce, they went after no software when they killed. Then they start killing the on-premise, one of the first SaaS companies around. Then you have Drift right now, one of the best companies that run marketing. They actually announced that they're going after lead forms. They want to kill the lead forms because that's not an effective process right now. Another example is Slack, that I like extremely. That it's even in this case, they were not. Stuart Butterfield, the founder of Slack, was not actually serious about saying like we're going to remove email. Email will not going to get removed, but it's a great positioning because people hate email. It's a great positioning to use because you have to pick sides between Slack and email, and that's another great example. And then for the company I personally worked with, it's Metadata. They automate your paid acquisitions, and they do multivariate testing on many different platforms to generate leads from you through paid acquisitions. And they went after A/B testing, basically saying like A/B testing is all way to do it. So when you talk to your customers about pain and problems, and try to understand what are the things that recurringly they talk about and they voice. So step number 7, this is an idea I picked up a while ago, and this is a framework that called empathy map that's used for user interface interviews and experience, where they provide product to your ideal customer, and they will use the product, and they ask, they hear what they say, they hear what they think, and what they do, and how they feel about the product, what they feel about using this product. So I've actually used this framework quite a bit to actually change how I ask questions of my customers. And it's a great way, because again, that allows you to understand not just like the things that the pains that we talk, like, hey, we're reducing cost, or we help you be more efficient, but like, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about those problems? What do you do about solving those problems? How do you think about all of that? And this is how I actually changed some of the questions that I ask, and actually focus like, hey, how do you feel about this process? I actually ask feel, because unconsciously, when your customer would hear the word feel, they would actually tell you how they feel. Well, I feel irritated, or I feel frustrated. So I would channel the question that I asked from my on the customer interviews, and actually ask them about, so with the goal of like, what they think. I want to know what they think, I want to know what they feel, and I want to know what they do. And that would allow you to create this empathetic view of your customers, where they will feel that you understand them as you actually understand and voice the concerns that your customers have. Step number 8, it's what they read, attend, and follow. And this is tremendously helpful in many different ways. But first of all, those are the channels you're going to get information about. You're going to read those. You can share. If you have a new hire in your organization and you have ideal customer profile, they can read through. They get to this section. Okay, so this is what my customers read. I will subscribe to this publication. I will subscribe to this newsletter. I will attend those meetups, and this will allow me to understand what's happening in the industry of my customers. I want to be on the phone with them, and I want to know what happened in the industry. If they feel like I am on top of what's happening in the industry, they'll feel trusted. They'll feel like you know what you're talking about. And this is also a great way to build your content strategy, because as you talk about, as you decide what topics to write about and how to promote your content, this is the places you wanna target. This is the places where your customers actually collaborate together. And step number 9, and this is who do you want your customers to become? This is really related to idea of actually creating customers. And this is with this, I would like to summarize everything that I've been saying here, that you want to understand your customers. And as you understand your customers better from all different angles, then you can actually build this view of how do you want to change the customer's life. Like right now, customers do this process and they have this feeling. Now, after using my solution, I want them to have this new process simplified, more effective, more effective in terms of more efficient. And this is the feeling that I want them to feel after using my product. And this is coming from a great, I first picked up, again, it's a couple of years ago, by a great book by Michael Sraj, as Who Do You Want Your Customers to Become, that talks about how great an innovative company actually design customer experiences by understanding them better, and actually forces them to be someone else and force them to be better version of themselves. And the way to do it is, this is an exercise that I suggest you go through. And first, outline that, as you get all this information about the daily lives and the processes that your current customers take through, outline what happens before your product, and then outline how do you want to change it. Like after using your product, what do you want to achieve on the right side? The same goes with the feelings. Before using their product, like were they frustrated? Were they feeling restricted in some ways, and then outline what are the feelings. Do you want them to feel empowered? Do you want them to, what are the feelings that you want to your solution and product to be actually associated with? And that's important, because as you create these feelings that you want to target, you will realize that your content is going to be talking about those feelings. Your sales process and your sales conversation is going to be all about those actually feelings somewhere underneath as a basis. And the customer status, like what is the customer status right now, and after using the product, are they going to get a promotion? Do you want them to kind of be more elevated? Do you want them to be more have more praise in the organization, for example, or do you want them to get promoted? So and I would like, again, give this a great example from Drift of how they actually visualize this process. And again, I cannot say enough how good Drift marketing is. And I think that's a great example of how, on the one side, they outline this old way of doing things. You know, you had to have forms, then you have to email and follow up. People submit that information, that somebody gets a call and takes weeks. And now on the left side, okay, they basically tell me the new process is like that. You're going to have this website chatbot. People are going to come there. And if you're not there to respond, we're going to automate this process and we're going to generate leads and we automatically going to schedule to you. Oh my God, this is amazing process. You can see that they actually try to point out, you know, this frown, smiley face, and the smiley face on the right, where you can see like what type of emotions they're going after. And this is an amazing example of companies that are doing that pretty well. So that was 9 different steps, and we have a few minutes. I really want to summarize a couple of things and go and explain you what to do next. So as I gather this all information, we talk about 9 different steps. Now, what you want to do is structure your information that you get from your customers, from your calls, from your conversation in person. And first, do it in the following process. Identify customer goals, like what your customers try to achieve. For example, we want to drive more traffic from content. Boom. Now, ask them current process that they take, and just outline step by step what are the current process they taken to actually reach that goal. Then outline, since you've been talking to the customers, okay, so I know this is a process that they've taken, but what are the problems that they have in this process? And outline those processes, and preferably here in prioritized manner, like outline so that the biggest pain are at the top. I don't typically find that more than 5 pains here is effective. I think it's between 3 and 5 is the amount of pains that you want to list. Sometimes it's actually one big pain that you want to focus on. Now, new process. Using your product, how your process will change, not your process, your customer process will change. I'm sorry, and outline that process, because you want to look at those 2 and see, okay, so right now we had 5 steps here before, and now customers needs to take only these 3 steps, and that's an amazing improvement. And then again, you can use it in marketing the same as Drift done, but you also can use it in creating content and actually creating your messaging and your story, that this is how your process will change with our product. Then proof points and metrics. When it comes to proof points and metrics, you want to figure out the metrics that will help you convince customers that you get them closer to the goal. So identify metrics that can say like, okay, this, you had X before you use our product. Now we change this process. Now this is a new, now you're going to use this product, and this is how much improvement you've seen after using our product. You want to measure that, because this is information you're going to use in your case studies. And this is information that you're going to be talking about in your marketing materials as well, in your email and even in your outreach, because you can say that, hey, our customers have had this problem and now their metric improved after using our solution. And also help measure what metrics help measure how you get customer, how do you reduce the pain as well. So if sometimes, if it's efficiency, right? So you had 5 hours that took you to do something, now it takes 1 hour. Maybe you cannot like this is not something that the goal for the customer, like they're not reporting on the efficiency, right? But you can find metrics that actually prove the point that that pain was reduced and you have the productivity of gaining back 4 hours of your life. Then outline discovery questions. And when you talk discovery questions, are basically is in a way for you to identify the pain early in the process of your conversation with the customers, and also identify the goals. So you want to structure this question so that you can learn about the customer goals. And objections. So typically, you're always going to have objections. Not a bad thing, but you need to be prepared for that. And when you create your ideal customer profile, understand what are the top objections that your customers have, so that you will have good answers for them. And more important, that you can be proactive about those objections and actually write content about it. Like because even if you hear those objections and your salesperson actually discusses those objections on the phone, you can then after the phone send them a follow-up email. Hey, by the way, I know we talked about this point before, but this is a great content that we've written, very in detail, that actually addresses your objections. And one small thing that's important to kind of, and I think it's a critical, as we talked about feelings. So as you go through this process, outline the feelings that your customers have before your product with your pain. What is the feeling that associated with pains and problems that your customers currently have? Maybe it's a long process, maybe it's annoying, something that is negative about their current situation. And then outline what are the feeling that you want them to get to. What are the feeling that after using the product, they'll be so excited, they'll be willing to talk about your product online. And I think that the great example again that I can give you here is that Slack. And early in the process, they actually went out of people actually sharing how excited they were actually using Slack, and they had all this Twitter wall where they would put Twitter messages about people telling praises about Slack. So just a quick review. So we talked about this 9 different ways to understand your ideal customer profile, and the goal of this whole webinar was to tell you and explain to you that you want to all this understanding of your ideal customer profile. And it doesn't mean that you have to go through this process in this particular order, but you want to understand from all of those different things, because your goal is to understand the customer on all different levels, not just the pains you're trying to solve. Don't just jump into creating persona. Don't just outline one pain and move on. Understand in what type of context your customers actually make a decision to buy a product, or how they solve current pains. And again, I wanted to reiterate a couple of principles. You can't please everyone, so make sure you understand your customers. Those companies that are close to their customers will win, so talk to your customers regularly. I have known a couple of companies that done a very good job of creating what they call like a customer trusted circles, where they had like 10 people that represent the ideal customers and they are current customers, and they will have a regular call with them and actually showing them the product roadmap, and they actually give them some tests of a new product before it's released to everybody else, and they would get feedback this way, so they will have a constant information about their customers. So principle number 3, sell the pain, not a solution. So this is why you want to understand the context, how your pain that you solve fits on everything else that the customer have to deal with on a daily basis. Principle number 4, that the bigger the pain you're solving, the easier it is to sell the solution in your product, because you don't have to spend a lot of time convincing that this is an important pain for customers. They already know that it is. And the one last thing is like principle number 5, and this is something I've talked when I started this presentation, that context is everything. It's not just about pain. Hey, we help you do X. No, it's about like how that X actually fits in the priorities. It's also about what other decisions that impact how you solve this X problem. And then maybe it's the way it's the organization structure, maybe it's certain marketing changes, but context is everything. So we have a couple, I know there's a couple of minutes and we are running a little bit late, and I'm going to provide, so there's a couple extra reading that I'm going to provide and some bonus materials. After this call, I'm going to send you email, and I will provide all the information, all the books that I mentioned here, as well as some additional articles so you can do your research. And as well as I will send you 3 templates. One that you probably have seen, the ideal customer profile template based on this presentation. I'm going to share strategic messaging template, something that you probably have seen in my article, and a recently article that I've released of how to do competitive analysis. So I'm going to provide those templates in the email below. Please ask all the questions that you have right now, and I'll try to follow up with you on those questions specifically. Sorry we didn't have enough time to answer all those questions, but I will. I wanted to get through this content, and I hope this was helpful. As one other thing before we leave is that, guys, I would really appreciate if you will provide feedback. I will send you the quick survey. I really want to learn from how do you find this helpful? What are the things that I can do to improve this presentation? And also, what do you think that was not covered but you want to be covered? So thank you so much. Please, connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Medium if you have not done so. And thank you. I hope this was helpful, and hope to see you again. I'll plan to do a couple other webinars into some other topics as well, because ideal customer profile is a one topic, but if you want to be creating this effective go-to-market strategy or marketing playbook, then you still have to deal with story. You have to create strategic messaging. You have to design buying process, and you have to have a content strategy as well. So thank you very much, and I will connect with you later. Thank you. Actually, for those people who are here, I'll actually maybe run a little bit later and ask a couple of questions. At what stage do you hold interviews? Can those people already be customers for some time, or should be potential customers? Amazing questions. I love that you asked it, because I actually forgot to talk about it. There's a lot of notion that you have to, I know Steli Afti talks about it a lot, that you have to analyze your current customers and go deep and analyze the metrics that they have and figure out what those ideal customers are, so you can get good lookalikes, right? But I believe you have to do both. You have to look at who your current customers are and learn from them, but you also want to go out and talk to your potential customers, because let's say you're selling to small companies right now and you want to move up market, and you're going to miss out. You're not going to get information about the more profitable customers that you're trying to reach by talking to your customers that are already inside of your organization or that already using your product. So do both. And that's a very excellent question, because I think that only way to do it is always go 50-50. It's always like understanding your customers and go and talking to potential customers as well, because you can't really, otherwise you might be in your own sort of feedback loop. You analyze your own customers, you kind of create what fits the best products for them, but you're not gonna find different opportunities, how to maybe go up market or how to target different profitable segment. How do you choose and contact those people? So that's another good question, Dmitry. So how do I choose to what people I want to talk to? So remember, I had that slide where we actually at the very beginning where I say that you have to go through a target audience. So the first time I would, if I very early in the process and I don't know who my ideal customer is quite well, or even if I do know, I want to go and talk to all different type of segments. Maybe it's a different type of companies. Maybe it's a different type of verticals. I think it's actually very valuable to talk to customers in different verticals. For example, when I worked with a company called PandaDoc that provides sales, documents automation for salespeople, they when they started early, I was there very early in the process, and I was helping them to reach out to their first customers. And when we designed those outbound campaigns, we actually start talking to all different people, and we realized that certain verticals are more profitable. So we actually created landing pages for those verticals. So, but we would never understand that if we didn't talk to all different kinds of people. So we create landing page for those who do resellers. We created a landing page who do what is it? I believe we created one for insurance market or something like that. So, but we will not identify those customers if we just didn't go out and talk across different segments. Could you explain once again, what do you mean by product champion? I guess I was covered on step 6. So product champion is somebody who, another good question. So product champion is something that I look at product champion, ideally that's going to be your sort of your ideal customer inside of your organization you're selling. So product champion is somebody that actually goes in and champions your product. They want to buy your product, and they go in an organization and try to convince people like, okay, this is a product we want to buy. So they're going to be your number one sort of person to go to when you are trying to sell your product. So this is a person that champions your product or your solution inside of their own organization. So they want to buy, and they can help you tell you who needs to be convinced to actually buy that product. A couple other questions. This person. That's another good question. And frankly, I don't know the answer for that. What's an ideal number of interviews approximately to craft the ICP? I don't know the right answer for this question, but I tell you what I have done, sort of my ranges. When I was working on my own product and I tried to go out and interview people, so I stopped at about 35. And the reason why I stopped about 35 is that at that point, for the last 5 conversations that I had, I didn't learn anything new. And this is where I think that's important when you ask different types of questions. And I didn't ask just the same questions. First 10 people I would interview was a very strict questions. Then I tried to modify questions, learn about more a little bit about process, then learn about more how they decide what topics to write about. So I would ask all different questions, and then as soon as I start hearing and stop learning new information on the call, that's kind of, I feel enough is enough. But I would say not do less than 10. I think 10 is a minimum. But if you keep learning from this process, I would say that you keep doing it. But if you start hearing the same things over and over again, I think it's enough to stop. Or maybe to kind of contrast that, maybe go outside of your target audience and just kind of get some extra different information, maybe just to see whether there's something else in that segment that you want to cover. Do you assist with developing ICPs outside of SaaS? I don't think I've ever worked with a consumer product in general, like something like an app, like a consumer app, because that's even more, that's a little bit different process. But I think a lot of those things that that we talked about today could be applied in consumer. Me personally, I have not done anything on a consumer side here, because I just on the consumer side, very often that you just have to talk to all different types of people, and a lot of times you have to test your product, because you can't talk to as many people personally to kind of cover every mass market that you want to go after. So a lot of here will based on actually learning how they use your product, right? So you're probably gonna get 10 people, interview them, show them the product, or talk to them, and then maybe they use your product, and then you get this feedback, you change, and then you launch the product, you see how they use your product again. So I hope that helps. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Please feel free to send me any other questions, and I will send all that information for you. And again, I hope this was helpful, and I really appreciate you joining me today.